Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody's having a great week and anticipating getting ready for Thanksgiving here in just a couple of weeks. Uh, I've been receiving a number of inquiries regarding the use of addendums, amendments, and even the modification of terms. So I'm just going to go through this quickly today, just so that everybody hopefully will be able to use this either now or later in making a decision on what form to go, what document to incorporate into the transaction and how it should be carried out. Um, the RPA, the Residential Purchase Agreement, or even the Residential Listing Agreement, is the foundation of the agreement between the buyer and the seller. From that initial agreement that has been signed off by both buyer and seller, that is the foundation. If there's ever any questions, if there's ever any debate or any controversy within the transaction, normally what we would do is go back and refer to the original RPA to come to a resolution as to what was agreed upon, what was put into writing. Keep in mind, everything that's put into writing and signed off and agreed to by both buyer and seller is what the agreement is. Anything verbal that takes place between the buyer and seller or between any of the agents and the buyer and seller, that's not part of the agreement. There's nothing to back a verbal agreement up. So keep in mind, everything must be in writing. So once you get that initial agreement, once you get the agreement to place the transaction into escrow and move forward to a successful closing, that is the foundation of the transaction, the real estate sale, moving property, real property from one entity, the seller, to the other, the buyer. So anytime you come to that complete agreement, and there comes a meeting of the minds between the buyer and seller that they wish to alter or change that agreement, then the document you would use to make that a written document and written approval by both buyer and seller is to have them, first of all, complete the addendum, whether it's addendum 1, 2, 3, or 4, whichever one you're on at the time you put it together, and identify the property, you identify the buyer, you identify the seller, and then in bullet point form, you list what the amended agreement is. So if you're changing a material fact in the agreement, then you would list it, whatever that item is, you would list that agreement. You would then have the buyer sign it if they're initiating, I should say, the agreement to the seller, or you should have the seller sign first if, again, they're the ones initiating the change, and then have the other party sign off. Once you have the change signed off by both the buyer and the seller, then you have an amended contract, and any controversy that may develop after this is all signed and executed and placed into escrow, then this becomes the new foundation of which we would work to get whatever dispute there is taken care of and settled. So again, the addendum that would change the material fact to an RPA, it would change whatever's been agreed upon and already signed, this would amend it. An amendment is if you're going to add to the agreement, and whatever you're adding to the agreement is approved by both the buyer and seller. So again, on the amendment of existing agreement terms, you would, or conditions of the escrow and the agreement, and this would cover both the purchase agreement, the residential lease month-to-month rental agreement. You would then, again, complete the top portion. You can follow the directions there. And then again, in bullet point form, don't make it wordy. The more wordy you get, the more confusing it gets, the more difficult it becomes to interpret exactly what was meant versus what was put into writing. So do it in bullet point form, and then add to the agreement, the RPA. So again, you would, if you're going to change or add to a term or a condition, then you would go ahead and put that into the addendum, the amendment, I should say. And that way you can do it in bullet point form. Again, have the buyer and seller sign the agreement so that it becomes official. If only the buyer signs it, or if only the seller signs it, it is not a change. Same is true with the addendum. Both parties have to sign in order to make it a legal change or addition. So keep that in mind. At the bottom of the addendum, if the buyer, for example, adds an amendment to the escrow and the seller does not agree to it, then there's a rejection of amendment. Make sure your seller initials that. If they reject it, and right below the rejection of amendment, there's confirmation of acceptance. Have the seller or buyer initial that if they're accepting what's being added to the transaction. So again, signatures are very important. Having one signature does not formalize the agreement. It takes two to go into a transaction. It takes two to make any amendments or addendums or changes to the agreement, and it takes two to cancel. So keep that in mind. Buyer and seller have to agree on all aspects of the transaction once it's in escrow, and actually going into escrow as well, as we all know. Modification of terms. Really what this is all about is if you're going to be changing the price on whether it's a sales price on a listing or whether it's a lease amount on a listing, residential leasing agreement, you would just put the new dollars amount in there. So again, the listing price, price range, lease, or rental amount shall be changed to. And all you got to do is just put, you don't have to say from 500,000 to 450. You can just put 450 and this will take care of it. You can also, with the modification of terms, extend the expiration date of the listing. So if you have a listing coming up that's going to be extended from say November 7th to December 30th, then you can use a modification of terms and then just put new expiration date is changed to 12/30/2018. So make sure you complete these forms. Again, it's very, very important for both the buyer and seller to agree to everything we've talked about here today. On the modification of terms, really what we're talking about is the seller here, because we're either changing the sale price or the lease price on a property, or we're changing an expiration date to extend it out. So again, we need the seller signature on that. That's all here on the form, and you just need to go ahead and put that in there. Now, on a modification of terms, we need the agent to sign it. We need Allison James Estates and Homes address on there, the Locker Avenue address or the Broadway address, or the local branch in your area if you're in Northern California, LA, Orange County, or Temecula, Marietta. So that's what I have for today. If you have any questions regarding any of these three documents, please feel free to reach out to your broker, and they'll be happy to communicate with you and give you any new information that might be updated on these documents, although what I just gave you is current and up to date. Hope you're having a great rest of the week, and I look forward to talking to you soon.